This week on Jerusalem Dateline, President Obama reveals his strategy to take on the jihadist army in Iraq and Syria. Critics question, is it too little, too late? Plus, when the ISIS leader declared a new caliphate, he fulfilled a century-old dream for millions of Muslims. We'll tell you why the caliphate means so much to the Muslim world and why it's a threat to the West, and how the latest threat to Israel sits on its northern doorstep. Hello and welcome to this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. I'm Chris Mitchell, coming to you this week from our Jerusalem studio. President Obama finally laid out his plan to defeat the militant Islamic ISIS army. He's hoping for congressional approval, but says he'll go forward without it. Meanwhile, critics are still asking why it took him so long to respond, and they question if this plan is enough to stop the Islamic monsters. CBN's White House correspondent Jennifer WISHON reports.
President Obama addressed Americans increasingly concerned about the threat Islamic State militants pose, as they increasingly doubt their commander-in-chief's ability to effectively face it.
We can't erase every trace of evil from the world, and small groups of killers have the capacity to do great harm. That was the case before 9/11, and that remains true today.
The biggest escalation to fighting over the past few weeks is the president's decision to launch airstrikes against ISIS in Syria. He's also deploying 500 additional U.S. troops to assist Iraqi security forces. America will continue fighting ISIS from the air in coordination now with Iraqis on the ground. House Speaker John Boehner responded. He has finally begun to make the case the nation has needed him to make for quite some time, that destroying this terrorist threat requires decisive action. A speech is not the same thing as a strategy, however. While the president presented a compelling case for action, many questions remain. Strong action is what Americans want. A Fox News poll shows 57% of voters think the president is weak and indecisive on foreign policy, while 54% think he's not prepared to do whatever it takes to defeat ISIS.
Because he didn't leave himself enough options in terms of how to deploy military forces, such as U.S. boots on the ground, I think there may be some things that will either have to be recalibrated in the future or there will be a significant shortfall in what we're able to accomplish.
The president called on Congress to approve a program to train and arm moderate Syrian rebels fighting ISIS and the Assad regime. Republicans and Democrats have serious questions about specifics on the president's plan, but they appear united in wanting to be involved.
The president should be seeking congressional approval, period.
I believe it would be a grievous mistake after 13 years of war to evolve toward a new strategy of taking prolonged military action without bothering to seek congressional approval.
Meanwhile, the president reminded Americans of the brutal nature of ISIS, but he made two things clear.
ISIL is not Islamic. No religion condones the killing of innocents, and the vast majority of ISIL's victims have been Muslim. And ISIL is certainly not a state.
But critics have attacked the president for not acknowledging the religious motivations of the Islamic extremists. Jennifer WISHON, CBN News, Washington.
While the U.S. prepares to hit ISIS in Syria, Israelis can already see radical Islamists on their border with Syria. We went up to the front lines to see the threat they pose to Israel. In late August, an Islamic group with ties to al-Qaeda scored big gains against the Syrian army. The fighting took place on Israel's northern doorstep. This is an observation point overlooking the Israeli-Syrian border. We've been hearing explosions in the background and seeing plumes of smoke, presumably fighting between al-Nusra forces and the Assad regime. One of the most important victories al-Nusra has won recently is taking over the strategic connector crossing about a mile behind me. For years, that served as the only portal between Israel and Syria. Arik Golansky manages a restaurant close to the border. It's in Kibbutz Marom Golan, with horses and guest houses. Now there's a new terrorist neighbor.
Al-Nusra control now 80% of the whole region of Konetra. It's not just here, but it's also the city, the villages.
The Golan Heights sits along Israel's northern border with Syria. Israel won the land in the 1967 Six-Day War, and for 40 years it's been Israel's quietest border. Now UN observers monitor the fighting from the heights. Recently, al-Nusra captured 45 peacekeepers. al-Nusra is on Israel's border now, but Golansky says ISIS is not far behind.
They are more towards to the south of the Golan, and most of them are between Syria and Lebanon.
Despite the fighting nearby, life for Israelis in the Golan Heights goes on. LILACH ASHTAR serves as a community liaison with the IDF.
We live a very peaceful life, but we know that a few kilometers away there is a war.
Israel will be ready, the border will be ready. The question is if the whole world is ready for this change of the Islam movement.
Being ready is why 2 U.S. pastors brought their tour group to the border.
Just to pray for the peace of Jerusalem, pray for the peace of the nation Israel.
The proximity of that push so close to the border here of Israel is a concern for all of us, and was certainly for the people here of Israel and the land of Israel, but for the world.
One common denominator of groups like al-Nusra is the desire and dream of a caliphate. In July, the leader of ISIS, Abu al-Baghdadi, established a new caliphate called the Islamic State. Most of the world, however, doesn't know the significance of a caliphate or why it's so important to Muslims. We spoke to some Islamic experts to learn the meaning of the caliphate. When a terrorist leader boldly declared a new caliphate, it sent shockwaves throughout the Middle East. The so-called Islamic State became the first caliphate in nearly 100 years. When Abu al-Baghdadi made his announcement, other groups like Al-Qaeda and the Muslim Brotherhood condemned it. Regardless of the internal competition, the caliphate would be a dream come true in the Islamic world.
This dream holds together some kind of a feeling that under the caliphate there is going to be a wonderful Islamic world. There's going to be a unity of all the Muslims. There is going to be a world power that cannot be matched by anything.
Islamic expert Professor MOSHE SHARON says the caliphate began after the death of Muhammad.
Immediately after the Prophet's death, somebody from the Islamic community had to lead the community. In Arabic, the word caliph is a substitute, somebody who takes the place of.
A long line of these caliphs have ruled during Islam's 1400-year history.
This huge empire which was created was called the caliphate, which means this huge territory with huge Islamic community at the head of which there is somebody who substitutes. Basically, they say to substitute the Prophet, but it's not true. Basically, somebody who substitutes God himself, because God is in heaven. Somebody has got to look after the faithful on earth, and of course, he is the caliph.
On earth, the caliph fights the non-Muslim world, called the House of War.
It's a mistake to think that he is like the Pope of the Muslims. He is a political and military leader, that under him all the Islamic world is united, and of course the war and the fighting against the Christian world would be far easier.
This is a jihadist offensive. From Syria to Iraq to Gaza, it's all part of an offensive move by forces that may have different names: ISIS, Hamas, Islamic Jihad, Al-Aqsa Martyr Brigade, what have you. But they're all on a mission, and that is to build a caliphate.
Middle East expert Joel Rosenberg says for these Muslims, it's a religious war.
To kill every Jew and Christian in their way, and to kill every Muslim that doesn't believe in a radical way that they believe. And this is a move. And why is it happening now? In part, it's happening because they believe that the time for the caliphate has come, the kingdom, the Islamic kingdom, the Islamic State.
Right.
But it also is in part because the United States is steadily withdrawing and retreating from the region, so they don't see forces that can stop them.
Sharon says Jerusalem is the prize and world domination their goal.
The major aim of the caliphate is to rule the world, and this can be done under the leadership of one caliph who he himself only can declare a holy war, a jihad.
More than a decade after 9/11, the West is still coming to grips with Islam's holy war. Up next, come with us back to the border to hear more about the threat of radical Islam to Israel and the world. It's a bit surreal. You can see and hear the fighting between radical Islamic groups and the Assad regime from the relative safety of an observation point overlooking Syria. Here's more of our conversation with Iraq Golansky, who lives in earshot and eyesight of the front lines of the Syrian civil war. This is where a lot of people come, right?
Yes, it's a major tourist attraction point because of the view, because of the scenery, because of the mountains.
And right now, this is what we're seeing.
Exactly. Part of the scenery now, you see the smoke. Now it's far, sometimes it's much closer to us. This is far. This is no, from here there's no mistake of fire coming here. But when it's here, when let's say Assad forces try to shoot Konetra over here, by mistake, you know, it's not bullets or missiles can go here.
So right now we're seeing that smoke in the background. We're hearing the bombs go off. This would be al-Nusra fighting Assad forces?
Or or Assad attacking al-Nusra. I'm not, you know. And now most people that come here, the tourists that come here, are coming
to watch
especially to watch this. And probably they will be disappointed if there's nothing going on.
So is this a regular occurrence, almost on a daily basis?
Right now, yes. For the past 2 weeks, it's on a daily basis. And actually today is quiet. Again, sometimes it's much closer. You can see the area over there. There was a fire here there. That
was a couple of weeks ago?
Yeah, almost a week and a half ago. And this is the border, so it's very close. This is our land. And
so when you say the border, that road right there that we see some cars on right now?
Yes.
That's the border?
Yes, behind it. Behind it.
With the flag?
The flag is the end of our vineyard. And this, where the flag is a spot that we love to go to. We always see there's a small pool there. We do barbecue there with the kids. It's again, this is usually very safe spot, very safe spot. And now on daily basis, we have to assess if we can go there to work in the vineyard or not.
Now, how much does al-Nusra control here?
Now al-Nusra control 80% of all Konetra region, which is
not only this
area, but all the way there, including this city. And by the end of the conversation, maybe we'll control everything, as you see. You know, it's going on.
Now, how about the crossing, the UN crossing?
The UN crossing is over there, and now is abandoned. On one side, there's Israeli soldiers. The base itself is abandoned. The other side, it's rebels, al-Nusra forces. And you can see them, it's like 50 meters. It's not
that close?
Yeah, very close, very close. You have to remember that in this crossing, it used to be crossing from us to Syria every day on daily basis, of goods, from Israel to Syria and from Syria to Israel.
Now, what do people know about al-Nusra? I mean, many people now are concerned about ISIS.
Well, al-Nusra basically is Al-Qaeda. So it's not ISIS. ISIS is more popular now. But again, they are not nice people, let's say.
It's not earlier, they're not a human rights group.
Yeah, exactly. It's not we cannot choose our neighbor, but this is the neighbors that move into our neighborhood, let's say this way.
Now, how is this going to change life for you? You have new neighbors now. You've had, this has been about the quietest border on Israel for 40 years or so.
That's true, that's true. Hopefully it won't change. Hopefully one of the sides will win, will gain control, and it will stay quiet, and they will put all the efforts to help the Syrian people go back to normal life, and that will help us to continue with our normal life. But we are
based on Al-Qaeda and ISIS, a lot of people aren't optimistic that's going to happen.
Yeah.
Now, from where we are, where's ISIS?
To the south of the Golan Heights.
This would be this way?
Yes, exactly. Behind this mountain. We don't feel them, we don't see them yet, but they're getting close to this border, although most of them are the border between Syria and Lebanon, which is not our border. Here is more al-Nusra.
For now. Been the talk about, there's actually been Syrian rebels that have been injured and wounded, and they come into Israel. Is that right?
Also happened on daily basis. Mostly is pregnant women, kids that got hurt in the battles. They bring them to the cross point, and we move them into Israel. There's actually, Israel set up a hospital over there for immediate help to the Syrian people. If it's more serious, they take them to hospital within Israel, in Tzfat.
So finally, Arik, what does this mean for the kibbutz and for Israel, this whole change in the neighborhood?
It means that we have to be alert, we have to be aware that this is happening, but it doesn't happen only here, it's happened all over the world. Okay, I think it's a more global problem than a specifically small problem here on the border, because Israel will be ready, the border will be ready. The question is if the whole world is ready for this change of the Islam movement.
Coming up, an unusual peace plan in the West Bank. The Israeli-Arab conflict has been going on for decades. But what many people don't realize is that Jews and Arabs in many cases actually do get along. CBN's Scott Ross takes us to one company that's making a difference.
They get printed. Salam alaikum.
This is SodaStream, the leading manufacturer of home beverage carbonation systems. It also has a practical solution for building Israeli-Palestinian-Arab relations.
This factory here used to be a munitions factory until about 15 years ago. The Israeli military made munitions for artillery. And then SodaStream came and transformed it into a soda factory. And we're turning bullets into bubbles. And the statue reads here in Hebrew, and you shall beat your swords into plowshares and your spears into pruning hooks. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, nor shall they learn war anymore.
And that's from Isaiah the prophet.
That's right.
Daniel Birnbaum leads SodaStream, a company more than 100 years old. I visited its largest plant in Mishor Adumim, located just outside Jerusalem. It's an area the Bible calls Judea, and much of the world refers to as the West Bank.
So we're selling our product in 45 countries around the world.
45?
Yeah. Not all of them are getting product from this factory because some of the countries, the Nordic markets, for example, they don't want anything from this factory. Yes. Because they think that it's a discriminatory apartheid situation. They don't want to touch it. So what we do for them is we make this product in a different factory. What a shame.
Yeah, it really is. Actress Scarlett Johansson was forced to make a choice between her work with SodaStream and Oxfam, a group fighting global poverty. Johansson is seen here in this Super Bowl commercial.
Start with plain water, add bubbles, mix in the perfect flavor. Look, a soda that's better for you and all of us.
But Oxfam told Johansson her work with SodaStream was incompatible because it furthers the poverty of the Palestinians. Johansson stood up for SodaStream.
So when I came here about 7 years ago, I inherited this facility. It did not employ Palestinians, it only employed Israelis. And I decided that it's the right thing to do is to employ people who also live in the area. And it evolved into a very interesting demographic situation where we have more Palestinians than Jews.
So how did they get along with each other? Any conflicts, any problems?
Scott, we are the largest employer of Palestinian people in the world, outside of the Palestinian Authority. We employ 500 Palestinians here, side by side with 350 Israeli Arabs and another 300 Israeli Jews. And we get along together. They're not killing each other, look, okay? And when we go to lunch break, we break bread together and we get to know each other.
SodaStream pays Israeli wages, 4 times what workers would earn in the Palestinian Authority, where unemployment is 30%. Workers say they're happy.
In the first year, the salary helped me to build a home and put a land. In the first year.
In the
first year, yes.
Are you a Palestinian Arab?
A Palestinian Arab, yes.
How do you get along with your Jewish co-workers?
Allah, everything is good. I work with the Jewish. No discrimination between Jewish or Arab people.
The plant produces about 15,000 soda makers a day. There are dozens of regular, diet, and naturally sweetened flavors, boasting far fewer calories than bottled soft drinks. And reusing the bottles means less damage to the environment.
This is the valve assembly room. And I call this room the United Nations because we have people from all over here. You'll see Palestinians and Israelis, and you'll see Russian immigrants and Ethiopians and Bedouins, women and men. I love this hall.
Sadly, disturbances by some Palestinian employees during fighting between Israel and Hamas earlier this summer led to the firing of dozens of Palestinians. Management says things are now back on track. Nevertheless, Birnbaum says the company is doing its part to build bridges and make peace.
So every single soda maker that we make here, every single soda maker that you would buy at Walmart or Bed Bath or Target or wherever, was made by a Jew and a Palestinian together living in harmony. And that gives me goosebumps.
Yeah, me too.
That's a miracle.
Up next, comments from 2 American pastors about the battle with radical Islam. When we traveled to the Syrian border, we met two American pastors who brought a tour group to Israel. We asked them about what it was like to see one of the front lines of radical Islam and what message they'll be taking back to the U.S. Pastor John, what has it been like for you to be up here on the front lines in the Golan Heights?
Oh, it's amazing. I loved the view, being able to look out into Syria and then back into the Galilee. It's a spot I've never been to before, and I was amazed by just the beauty, and we could see the border fence and at a distance some of the fighting that's going on tragically. I think the Israeli Defense Force is doing a good job protecting, its Golan, and it's far enough away that it's not really that frightening. I'm saddened by the civil war that's going on in Syria, and we're praying for the people of Syria, that God will bring some resolvence to that. So, but we're Americans. We're not really afraid of the fighting.
What kind of message is this being here you're going to take back to your church and community?
Just to pray for the peace of Jerusalem, pray for the peace of the nation Israel, and that we need to support them and stand with them.
Well, I think it's been a great opportunity for us to be able to come as Christians from the United States, to be able to stand and support the troops here in Israel and the people of Israel, the land of Israel. It's going to help us in going back to the United States and to our churches, and to really bring the reality of the destruction, the war, the constant threat that is posed on the people of Israel and the land of Israel. This battle has got to be won on our knees, and we have to be in prayer and constant prayer. We're thankful for the opportunity to be able to come here, and for the Lord to be able to allow us to meet you on this hill as well. It's a blessing for us to know that there are Christian television that are going to help be able to get this message out to those that are really the prayer warriors that need to be on their knees. Amen. So thank you for being here.
Well, that's all for this edition. I'm Chris Mitchell. We'll see you next time on Jerusalem Dateline.